The acrid stench of burning rubber and diesel fuel clawed at my nostrils before I even saw the flames, a horrifying perfume that twisted my stomach into a knot of pure cold dread. My tires screeched as I rounded the corner onto Primrose Lane, the suburban tranquility I usually associated with this neighborhood shattered by the scene unfolding under the sickly orange glow of the inferno. The bus, our bus, the one specifically retrofitted for the children in my inclusive education program, was a raging skeleton of fire, its cheerful yellow paint blistering and peeling away like sunburnt skin, revealing the blackened, contorted metal beneath. Flames licked hungrily at the sky, spitting embers onto the manicured lawns of the silent watching houses, their windows like vacant eyes, reflecting the terrible spectacle. Sirens wailed in the distance, a mournful Dopplering cry that seemed to arrive too slowly, each second an eternity. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The children. Oh God, the children. I slammed the car into park, not even bothering to pull fully to the curb, and flung open the door, the heat washing over me like a physical blow. Smoke, thick and oily, billowed outwards, making me cough, my eyes streaming. Through the haze I could see them. Small, terrified figures huddled on Mrs. Henderson's lawn across the street, their faces smudged with soot tears, carving clean paths through the grime. Marcus, our driver, his usually jovial face pale and etched with shock, was trying to shepherd them further away from the heat, his voice hoarse as he counted and recounted. I saw Imani, her small hands clamped over her ears, her wheelchair thankfully a safe distance from the blaze, but her body rigid with fear. Sarah, her mother, was already there, a blur of motion, dropping to her knees beside Imani, her face a mask of anguish. Marcus. I yelled, my voice cracking as I stumbled towards them, my professional composure shredded, replaced by a raw primal fear. Are they all out? Is everyone okay? He turned his eyes wide and haunted. Dr. Hayes. Thank God. Yes, all 12. We got them out. Just before it really went up. His arm, I noticed then, was wrapped in a hastily applied bandage already stained crimson. A little singed, some scrapes. Overwhelmed, but alive. Relief so potent it almost buckled. My knees washed through me, quickly followed by a tidal wave of rage. This wasn't an accident. This couldn't be an accident. Not here, not this bus. The precision of it, the vulnerability of its passengers, screamed of malice. I knelt, my gaze sweeping over the children. Young Michael was sobbing into the shoulder of his older sister Lena, who stared at the burning bus with a terrifyingly blank expression. Jamal was rocking back and forth, his usual stream of chatter silenced. The aides, Ms. Peterson and Mr. Ramirez, were doing their best, murmuring reassurances, wiping faces, but their own shock was palpable. What happened? I asked Marcus, my voice low, tight. He shook his head, wincing as he shifted. It happened so fast, Dr. Hayes. We were at the corner of Primrose and Oak, the last pickup. I smelled something, sweet, almost then gasoline, strong. Then this whoosh. Flames erupted near the rear passenger side, right where the lift is. His eyes met mine, and I saw the dawning horror of realization in them. Someone did this. I saw a figure running just a glimpse down Henderson's side yard as I was getting the first kids off. A figure. My mind raced. Primrose Lane. This was Carol Miller's street. Carol, the self-appointed queen of the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association, the woman who had been waging a relentless, increasingly vitriolic campaign against our new bus route, against the presence of those children, as she so delicately put it, in her neighborhood. Her complaints had started with noise, the imagined disruption to their pristine suburban peace, the supposed impact on property values. But her rhetoric, delivered with venom at HOA meetings and in thinly veiled posts on the community Facebook page, had quickly devolved into something far uglier, something that targeted the children themselves, their disabilities, their race. The sirens were deafening now as the first fire truck roared onto the scene, followed by police cruisers, their lights strobing, painting the unfolding nightmare in flashes of red and blue. Firefighters spilled out uncoiling hoses, shouting orders. The hiss of water hitting the inferno joined the cacophony. I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady, but my resolve hardening into something like steel. I looked at the terrified, innocent faces of the children I had fought for, children whose right to an education to dignity was my life's work. Then I looked at the burning hulk of the bus, a symbol of that fight, now a monument to hate. And I thought of Carol Miller, her perfectly coiffed hair, her smug smile, her aura of untouchable entitlement. She didn't know who I was. Not really. She knew me as an employee of the school district, someone to be dismissed, to be steamrollered. She didn't know I was Dr. Aaliyah Hayes, Director of Inclusive Education for the entire state, a woman who had stared down far bigger bullies than her and who could not let this stand. If she had done this, if this was her handiwork, she had just made the biggest mistake of her meticulously curated life. The central question wasn't just why anymore, though the depravity of it still staggered me. It was what I was going to do about it, and the answer was simple: everything. The ensuing days were a blur of controlled chaos, a maelstrom of official duties, emotional support, and a burning, simmering anger that I channeled into focused action. My office, usually a place of policy discussion and program development, transformed into a crisis command center. The scent of stale coffee and sleepless nights clung to the air, a stark contrast to the lavender potpourri I usually kept on my windowsill. My team, a small but fiercely dedicated group, rose to the occasion with a grim determination that mirrored my own. We arranged trauma counseling for the children and their families for Marcus Ms. Peterson and Mr. Ramirez. We coordinated with the district to find a temporary replacement bus, a less ideal but functional vehicle, ensuring there was minimal disruption to the students' routines, a small act of normalcy in an upended world. My days were a tightrope walk. I'd spend mornings visiting the affected families, offering what comfort I could, listening to their fears, their anger, their heartbreak. Young Imani had reverted to a state of near catatonia, for the first 48 hours, her communication device lying untouched beside her. Her mother, Sarah, a single parent juggling 2 jobs, looked hollowed out her eyes, holding a mixture of grief and a new steely resolve I recognized from my own reflection. "They won't break her, Dr. Hayes," she'd whispered to me, her hand stroking Imani's hair. "They won't break us." I'd assured her with every fiber of my being that we would fight this together. Then I'd pivot to meetings with the superintendent, the school board, law enforcement, navigating the bureaucracy, pushing for answers, for action. Detective Reynolds, a weary-looking man with kind eyes, but a no-nonsense demeanor, was assigned to the case. He listened patiently as I recounted Carol Miller's history of harassment, her escalating rhetoric, her almost obsessive focus on the bus and its passengers. I provided him with copies of her emails to the school board, screenshots of her social media posts, minutes from HOA meetings where her venom had been on full display. "It's circumstantial, Dr. Hayes," he'd said, tapping his pen on his notepad. "Strongly suggestive, I'll grant you. But we need more than that to make an arrest for arson, especially one this potentially high profile." I understood. But understanding didn't lessen the urgency, the gnawing fear that whoever did this was still out there, emboldened. The community of Meadowbrook was on the surface, aghast. Thoughts and prayers flooded social media. Neighbors dropped off casseroles at the fire station. But beneath the veneer of sympathy, there was an undercurrent of unease, of whispers. Some defended Carol, albeit cautiously. "She's a bit much, but she wouldn't do that. She's just protective of our neighborhood." The classic refrains of denial, of willful blindness. The HOA, after a perfunctory statement condemning violence, fell silent, their usual flurry of emails about lawn maintenance and approved paint colors conspicuously absent. My life before this, my normal, seemed a distant memory. It had been a life of purpose, certainly, but one with its own rhythm. Early mornings spent reviewing IEPs, individualized education programs, ensuring each child's unique needs were met. Long afternoons in schools across the state, observing classrooms, mentoring teachers, sometimes just sitting with a child who was struggling, reminding them of their strengths. Evenings were often consumed by policy work, by advocating for better funding, for more resources, for a society that truly embraced inclusion, not just as a buzzword, but as a fundamental human right. I lived in a modest apartment downtown, filled with books and the lingering scent of the herbal teas I favored. My work was demanding, often exhausting, but it was fulfilling. It was a quiet fight, waged in boardrooms and classrooms, one small victory at a time. The bus route through Meadowbrook had been one such victory. It was a new route designed to serve a small cluster of students with significant disabilities who had recently moved into an adjacent, more affordable housing development. Meadowbrook, with its wide, tree-lined streets and direct access to main thoroughfares, was the most logical path. We'd done our due diligence, traffic studies, community consultations, everything by the book. There had been grumbles, of course, the familiar NIMBYism. But Carol Miller had taken it to another level. Her first official complaint landed on my desk a week after the bus route began, 2 months before the fire. It was a meticulously typed 3-page letter, co-signed by a handful of her neighbors, detailing the unacceptable noise levels of the bus, the disruption to the peaceful character of their enclave, the safety concerns posed by its frequent stops. The language was coded, but clear. The bus itself wasn't the issue. It was who the bus represented. It was the presence of children, who were different children, who challenged their curated illusion of perfection. I had responded politely, professionally, addressing each concern with facts, with data. I offered to meet with her with the HOA. She declined, preferring to escalate her campaign. Flyers appeared on lampposts, decrying the special needs bus as a drain on taxpayer money and a threat to property values. Her posts on the Meadowbrook Neighbors United Facebook page became more frequent, more personal. She targeted Marcus, our driver, a kind middle-aged black man with an impeccable driving record, accusing him of speeding, of reckless endangerment. She posted blurry photos of the bus taken from behind her pristine curtains, complaining about it idling for excessive periods while the lift operated. The inciting incident. The moment I knew this was more than just standard neighborhood discontent happened about a month before the fire. I was at a district-wide meeting when my phone buzzed with an urgent text from Ms. Peterson, one of the aides. Carol Miller blocking bus with her car, refusing to move. Kids getting distressed. I excused myself, my heart pounding, and called Marcus directly. He was calm, but I could hear the tremor in his voice. She's parked right in front of us, Dr. Hayes, at the stop on Elm. Says we're blocking her driveway, but we're nowhere near it. The kids, they're getting agitated. Jamal is starting to have a meltdown. Call the police, Marcus. Right now, I'm on my way. By the time I arrived, sirens already approaching. Carol Miller was standing beside her gleaming silver SUV, arms crossed, her expression one of defiant indignation. She was yelling at Marcus, who stood protectively by the bus door. This is a residential street. We have rules. You people can't just do whatever you want. Ma'am, I said, stepping between them, keeping my voice as level as I could manage. I'm Dr. Aaliyah Hayes with the school district. This bus is operating on a legally approved route. You are obstructing its path and distressing these children. She turned her venom on me. Oh, you're the one responsible for this outrage, bringing these elements into our community. We pay high taxes to live here, and we won't have it ruined. Her eyes, cold and blue, raked over me, lingering for a moment on my dark skin before flicking dismissively away. The implication was clear, unspoken, but as loud as a shout. You people. These elements. It wasn't just about the bus anymore. It was about who I was, who the children were. The police arrived, and after a terse conversation, a reluctant Carol Miller was instructed to move her vehicle. She did so with a look of pure hatred directed at me, a look that promised this was far from over. As she drove away, she mouthed the words, "You'll regret this." That incident marked a shift. Her complaints to the district became more unhinged. She started following the bus on its route, filming it with her phone, a deliberate act of intimidation. We reported it, of course. The police issued a warning for harassment. It seemed to deter her public displays, but the online vitriol intensified, now tinged with a martyr complex. She was the brave resident fighting for her community against the faceless, uncaring bureaucracy. The first truly shocking escalation, the one that made me physically sick with apprehension, occurred 2 weeks before the fire. We had organized a small Saturday morning sensory play event for the students at the Meadowbrook Community Clubhouse, a facility technically open to all residents and their guests. We had booked it weeks in advance, paid the fee. The children were excited. For some, it was their first time attending such an event. An hour before, it was due to start as our team was setting up. The power to the clubhouse was cut. Not just the trip switch. The main breaker for the building had been deliberately thrown, and the access panel to the breaker box, usually unlocked, was now secured with a brand new padlock. Carol Miller, who lived 2 doors down from the clubhouse, was seen gardening in her front yard, watching with an air of detached amusement as we scrambled to find an alternative. The padlock was identical to ones she used on her own garden shed. Again, circumstantial. Again, no direct proof. But the message was chillingly clear, a denial of a basic right, an act of petty cruelty designed to isolate and punish the children, and by extension, me and my program. We had to cancel the event, trying to explain to tearful children and frustrated parents why their promised morning of fun had been snatched away. The distress it caused, particularly to children for whom routine and predictability were paramount, was profound. Then came the second incident, even more brazen, just a week before the inferno. Marcus reported that while he was on his route, a dark-colored SUV, matching the description of Carol Miller's, had aggressively tailgated the bus, then swerved dangerously in front of it, braking sharply, forcing him to slam on his own brakes. The children were jolted, terrified. One of the aides banged her knee. Marcus, a seasoned driver, was shaken. He couldn't get a clear look at the driver, only a flash of blonde hair, but he was convinced it was her. We filed another police report. This time, Detective Reynolds himself came to see me. "We're taking this very seriously, Dr. Hayes." He'd said, his brow furrowed. "But she's lawyered up, denies everything, says she's the victim of a smear campaign because she dared to speak out about legitimate community concerns." He sighed. "Without a clear ID of the driver or a confession, our hands are tied on that one as an assault. We can warn her about reckless driving if we can even prove it was her car definitively." The frustration was eating at me. It felt like we were watching a bomb tick down and no one could or would defuse it. Now, standing in the aftermath of the bus, burning the smell of smoke still clinging to my clothes days later, those earlier escalations seemed like mere tremors before the earthquake. The police investigation was progressing, but slowly. They had canvassed the neighborhood. Some residents reported seeing a figure fleeing the scene, but descriptions were vague: medium height, wearing dark clothing and a hoodie. Others, loyal to Carol, or perhaps intimidated by her, claimed to have seen nothing. Carol herself, through her expensive lawyer, issued a statement expressing her deep shock and sorrow at the tragic incident and vehemently denying any involvement. She even had the audacity to offer her full cooperation with the investigation, a hollow gesture designed for public consumption. The media had descended first local, then regional. The story of disabled black students on a bus torched in a quiet suburban neighborhood was potent, horrifying. My face, my name were suddenly everywhere. I gave measured interviews focusing on the children's welfare, the need for community solidarity, the unwavering commitment of the school district to inclusive education. But privately to Detective Reynolds, I was relentless. This was a hate crime detective, I insisted during one of our many calls. This wasn't just arson. This was targeted. It was meant to terrorize, to exclude. He didn't disagree. "The evidence will tell the story, Dr. Hayes. We're working on forensics. If there's any trace evidence on the bus or at her property." Her property was key. They had obtained a warrant to search Carol Miller's house and her silver SUV. The search, according to Reynolds, had yielded items of interest, but he remained tight-lipped about specifics, citing the ongoing investigation. The waiting was agony. Each day that passed without an arrest felt like a victory for hate, a wound left to fester in our community. The children were resilient, more so than most adults. They returned to school on the replacement bus, a little quieter, a little more watchful, but they returned. Amani started using her communication device again, slowly at first, then with her usual determined taps. She typed out "Firebad" to Sarah, then after a long pause, "Friends good." Sarah cried when she told me. Marcus, his arm healing, insisted on driving his presence, a comforting reassurance to the students and their families. He told me he wouldn't let that woman chase him away from his kids. His quiet courage was an inspiration. But the shadow of the event hung heavy. The Meadowbrook HOA finally scheduled an emergency community meeting. The email, when it arrived, was couched in neutral language to discuss recent events and community safety. It was clear, however, that this would be a referendum on Carol Miller, on the soul of their carefully manicured neighborhood. I knew I had to be there, not just as Dr. Aaliyah Hayes, Director of Inclusive Education, but as a witness, as an advocate, as someone who would not let this be swept under the rug. The days leading up to the meeting were fraught with tension. My team and I worked tirelessly, not just on the immediate needs of the students, but also on preparing a dossier of Carol's actions, a timeline of her escalation, meticulously documented. We also started hearing whispers, faint at first, then more distinct. whispers from within Meadowbrook itself. It seemed Carol Miller's scorched earth tactics hadn't endeared her to everyone even within the HOA's leadership. The midpoint twist, the revelation that began to shift the ground beneath Carol's feet, came not from a dramatic police raid, but from an unassuming brown envelope that appeared on my office desk, marked simply for Dr. Hayes, urgent. There was no return address. Inside, I found a USB stick and a single typed note. Some of us don't agree. Check the HOA internal comms folder. Good luck. My heart pounded as I inserted the USB into my laptop. The folder contained a trove of emails, internal discussion threads from a private online forum used by the HOA board members. And there it was, in black and white evidence, that several board members, while perhaps not explicitly endorsing arson, had been quietly encouraging Carol's initial efforts to deal with the bus situation. There were emails praising her strong stance discussions about how to apply pressure on the school district, even a suggestion from one board member, a Mr. Henderson, whose lawn the children had sheltered on during the fire, ironically, that they should explore legal means to restrict access for non-resident vehicles on certain streets, a clear attempt to target the bus. One email chain was particularly damning. It detailed a discussion about the community clubhouse incident. Carol had boasted privately to the board about her solution to the problem of our sensory play event. While no one explicitly congratulated her for cutting the power and padlocking the breaker, there was a clear tone of tacit approval, of shared relief that the disruption had been averted. One board member, a Ms. Albright, had even replied, "Well, that certainly sent a message, didn't it? Sometimes direct action is needed when bureaucracy fails." This wasn't just Carol Miller lone wolf. This was a sickness that had infected a part of the community leadership. It wasn't proof of arson against her, not directly, but it demolished her narrative of being a concerned citizen acting alone. It showed a pattern of complicity, of shared prejudice. It gave me leverage. It gave Detective Reynolds a fresh avenue of inquiry, new names to interview, new pressure points. He was, I could tell, grimly pleased. This changes things. Dr. Hayes, he'd said, his voice tight with renewed energy. This shows a pattern of escalating behavior and potentially co-conspirators, or at least individuals with guilty knowledge. The night of the Meadowbrook HOA community meeting arrived heavy with anticipation and a palpable sense of dread. The clubhouse, the same one where the power had been mysteriously cut weeks before, was packed. Residents stood along the walls, their faces a mixture of anger, fear, curiosity, and a defensive apprehension. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and the faint lingering scent of stale coffee and anxiety. I sat in the front row, flanked by Sarah Imani's mother and Marcus. Imani herself was at home. We'd decided this environment would be too overwhelming for her. A small contingent from my office was also present, along with a few reporters from local news outlets who had been tipped off that this meeting might be more than just a standard HOA debrief. The HOA president, a flustered-looking man named Arthur Jenkins, tapped nervously on the microphone. "Welcome, residents. As you know, we're here tonight to discuss the recent unfortunate incident involving the school bus and to talk about community safety moving forward." He swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the room, carefully avoiding mine. Before Jenkins could continue, a familiar, imperious voice cut through the room. "Unfortunate incident, is that what you call it? Arthur, an act of terrorism right here in our neighborhood, and you call it an unfortunate incident." Carol Miller stood up, her posture rigid, her voice dripping with indignation. She was dressed impeccably as always, in a crisp cream pantsuit, her blonde hair perfectly styled. She was playing the victim, the concerned citizen, demanding action. I, for one, have been deeply disturbed by the lack of real answers, the lack of protection for us, the law-abiding residents of Meadowbrook. A smattering of applause, mostly from a tight knot of her known associates, rippled through the room. My jaw tightened. Sarah's hand found mine, her grip firm. Jenkins looked even more uncomfortable. "Carol, please, we're trying to have an orderly discussion." "Orderly," she scoffed. "While criminals run rampant, while our children are scared to play in their own yards because of the element. That woman," she pointed a perfectly manicured finger directly at me, "has brought into our lives. I demand to know what this HOA, what the police are doing to ensure our safety." This was it, the moment of confrontation. I I stood up, my heart pounding, but my voice steady, amplified by the microphone I had requested beforehand, knowing I would need to be heard. Mrs. Miller, I began, my gaze locking with hers. You speak of fear of safety. Let me tell you about fear. Let me tell you about the 12 children, some as young as 6, who had to be pulled from a burning bus on your street. Children with disabilities, children who are black, who were targeted because of who they are and what they represent. A hush fell over the room. Even Carol seemed momentarily taken aback by the directness of my address. You talk about elements being brought into your community. I continued, my voice rising with controlled passion. These elements are children seeking an education, children who have every right to be here, every right to feel safe. The only element that has brought terror to this community is the one that doused that bus in gasoline and set it ablaze. Carol's face flushed an ugly red. How dare you imply? I am as shocked and horrified as anyone. I have cooperated fully with the police. Have you, Mrs. Miller? I countered, taking a step forward. Have you cooperated by explaining your escalating campaign of harassment against that bus, against its driver, against those children, your attempts to block the bus with your car, your successful sabotage of a children's event right here in this clubhouse by cutting the power and padlocking the breaker box? Gasps rippled through the audience. Heads turned towards Carol, whose composure was finally starting to crack. Her eyes darted towards Mr. Henderson and Ms. Albright, who suddenly looked very pale and intensely interested in their shoes. Those are outrageous lies, Carol sputtered. Slander. There's no proof of any of that. Isn't there? I pressed, my voice ringing with conviction. I held up the USB stick. I have here copies of internal HOA communications, Mrs. Miller, emails where you boast about your solution to the sensory play event, emails where certain board members I let my gaze sweep pointedly over Henderson, and Albright applaud your direct action and discuss ways to apply pressure to get rid of the bus. It seems your campaign of intimidation wasn't quite as solitary as you'd like us all to believe. The atmosphere in the room had shifted entirely. The murmurs were no longer supportive of Carol, but suspicious, angry. People were looking at her then, at the board members I had implicitly identified, with dawning comprehension and disgust. Mr. Jenkins was wringing his hands, his face ashen. This is an internal HOA matter, he stammered, trying to regain control. Dr. Hayes, this is highly inappropriate. Inappropriate. Sarah, Amani's mother, suddenly stood beside me, her voice shaking but clear. My daughter. My Amani hasn't slept through the night since her bus was set on fire. She's terrified of loud noises, of the smell of smoke. She's a child. What's inappropriate is that this woman, Carol Miller, and anyone who supported her, created an atmosphere of hate that led to this. What's inappropriate is that you, Mr. Jenkins, and your board did nothing to stop it, and some of you even encouraged it. Carol Miller looked cornered, her eyes wild. This is a witch hunt. I am the victim here. My property values. My peace of mind. Suddenly, the main doors of the clubhouse burst open. Detective Reynolds stepped in, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. A stunned silence fell over the room. All eyes were on them. Reynolds' gaze scanned the room, settling on Carol Miller. Carol Miller. He said, his voice calm but authoritative, resonating in the sudden stillness. You are under arrest for the arson of school bus 47, for multiple counts of reckless endangerment, and on suspicion of committing a hate crime. A collective gasp went through the room. Carol Miller's face, already pale, turned a ghastly white. No, this is a mistake. I wouldn't. Her voice rose to a shriek. You have no proof. We have proof, Mrs. Miller. Reynolds said, his tone unwavering. Forensic evidence recovered from your property, including traces of the specific accelerant used on the bus and clothing matching witness descriptions found concealed in your garage. Combined with your documented history of harassment and the new evidence of your escalating efforts to obstruct the bus route and intimidate its passengers, we have more than enough. The charge, given the targeting of the children due to their race and disabilities, will indeed be pursued as a hate crime. One of the officers stepped forward, handcuffs glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights of the clubhouse. You have the right to remain silent, he began. Carol Miller didn't seem to hear him. Her eyes, wide with disbelief and dawning terror, were fixed on me. The mask of suburban entitlement had shattered, revealing the venomous, desperate creature beneath. For a moment, a fleeting, chilling moment, I saw not just hate in her eyes, but a profound, uncomprehending shock. The shock of someone who had always believed herself to be untouchable, who had just discovered that actions, even her actions, have consequences. The officers cuffed her. The sound of the metal ratcheting shut was a sharp, definitive click in the stunned silence of the room. As they led her away past the shocked faces of her erstwhile neighbors, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, a small, involuntary sound escaped her lips, a whimper of utter desolation. No one spoke. No one moved. The sight of Carol Miller, the self-proclaimed Queen of Meadowbrook, being escorted out in handcuffs, was a tableau none of them would ever forget. The aftermath of Carol Miller's arrest was swift and reverberating. The local news reporters in the room had their headline, and by the next morning, the story was exploding across state and then national news outlets. HOA Karen, arrested for torching disabled student's bus. Hate crime charges filed in school bus arson. The ugly underbelly of a picture-perfect suburb had been exposed, and the nation was watching. Detective Reynolds, true to his word, had built an airtight case. The forensic evidence was damning. Security footage from a neighbor's camera, initially overlooked, captured a figure matching Carol's build and wearing a distinctive jacket, later found hidden in her garage, reeking of accelerant, moving furtively towards the bus, minutes before the fire erupted and then fleeing the scene. The digital trail from the leaked HOA emails painted a clear picture of her escalating obsession and the enabling environment that had fostered it. Several of Carol's closer associates, facing potential charges of obstruction or conspiracy after the revelations at the community meeting, began to cooperate with the investigation, providing further details of her increasingly erratic behavior and her vitriolic statements about the children and the bus route. The Meadowbrook HOA imploded. Mr. Jenkins and the board members implicated in the email scandal resigned en masse amidst a firestorm of resident outrage. An interim committee was formed, composed of shell-shocked but determined homeowners who were genuinely horrified by what had happened in their midst. They reached out to me, to the school district, offering profound apologies and a commitment to work towards healing and genuine inclusivity. The first action of the interim committee was to publicly condemn Carol Miller's actions and to strip her in absentia of her HOA membership and any associated privileges, a symbolic but significant gesture. Carol Miller's trial became a media circus. Her expensive lawyer attempted to paint her as a misunderstood community activist, a victim of a vendetta by an overzealous school official, me. They tried to discredit the forensic evidence, the witness testimonies, even the children's experiences. But the prosecution, armed with the mountain of evidence and the clear narrative of escalating hate, was relentless. I was called to testify. Sitting in the witness box facing Carol Miller across the courtroom, she looked smaller, diminished, the arrogant defiance replaced by a sullen resentment. I recounted the timeline of her harassment, the fear in the children's eyes, the profound impact of her actions. I spoke of the principles of inclusive education, of the right of every child to learn and thrive without fear. I looked at the jury, at the judge, at the packed courtroom, and I spoke my truth. Sarah, Imani's mother, also testified, her quiet dignity and heartbreaking account of Imani's trauma, leaving many in the courtroom in tears. Marcus, his voice steady, described the terror of the fire, his desperate efforts to save the children and Carol's previous attempts at intimidation. The midpoint twist's leaked emails became crucial evidence demonstrating the premeditated nature of Carol's campaign and the broader context of animosity she had cultivated. The jury was out for less than 6 hours. The verdict: guilty on all counts. Arson, multiple counts of aggravated reckless endangerment, and significantly, the hate crime enhancement, which would substantially increase her sentence. The sentencing hearing followed a few weeks later. The judge, a stern, experienced woman, delivered a scathing indictment of Carol Miller's actions before handing down her sentence. "You targeted the most vulnerable among us, Mrs. Miller," she said, her voice devoid of sympathy. "You targeted children because of who they are, because of their race, because of their disabilities. You cloaked your hatred in the guise of community concern, but your actions reveal a deep and disturbing malice. You sought to terrorize, to exclude, to silence. Instead, you have only amplified the voices of those you tried to harm and exposed the ugliness of your prejudice to the world." Carol Miller was sentenced to 15 years in state prison. There were gasps in the courtroom, followed by a wave of quiet relief from the victims' families and supporters. Her assets, including the pristine house on Primrose Lane, were subject to forfeiture, with a significant portion ordered to be paid as restitution to the school district for the destroyed bus and to a fund established to support the ongoing therapeutic needs of the children. The wheels of justice, though sometimes slow, had ground exceedingly fine. In the weeks and months that followed, something remarkable began to happen in Meadowbrook and the wider community. The shock of the bus burning the trial and Carol Miller's conviction acted as a catalyst for change. The interim HOA committee, now a newly elected board, launched a series of community dialogues on diversity and inclusion. They invited me to speak not as an accuser, but as a partner. They actively sought ways to support our students, fundraising for new sensory equipment for the school, volunteering for a buddy reading program. The new bus, purchased with a combination of insurance money restitution funds and community donations, was unveiled in a small ceremony. It was state-of-the-art, brightly decorated with artwork created by the students themselves. Amani, using her communication device, officially named it the Phoenix. The children, with the unwavering support of their families, their teachers, and dedicated therapists, continued to heal. Their resilience was a daily inspiration. They still carried the scars, visible and invisible, but they were not defined by them. They laughed again, played again, learned again. Young Michael started writing a comic book about a superhero who fought prejudice. Lena began mentoring younger students. Jamal's cheerful chatter slowly returned, more thoughtful now, but just as vibrant. The national attention the case had garnered also had a ripple effect. It sparked conversations in other communities and other school districts about the insidious nature of NIMBYism when it curdles into hate, about the importance of standing up to intolerance, about the urgent need for truly inclusive spaces. My office received calls from educators across the country, seeking advice, sharing their own struggles, and forming new alliances. Life, for me, eventually settled into a new kind of normal. The relentless pace of the crisis subsided, replaced by the steady, ongoing work of building a more equitable world, one child, one school, one community at a time. The memory of the fire, the acrid smell of smoke, the terror in those small faces would never fully leave me. It was etched into my soul, a permanent reminder of what was at stake. But alongside it now was the memory of the community's response, the courage of the children, the solidarity of strangers, the ultimate triumph of justice. One crisp autumn afternoon, almost a year after the fire, I stood on Primrose Lane. The houses were still perfectly manicured, the trees a riot of fall colors. Carol Miller's former house had new owners, a young family with children who played in the front yard. The new bus. The Phoenix pulled up to the corner of Primrose and Oak, its cheerful paint gleaming in the sunlight. Marcus waved from the driver's seat. The lift whirred smoothly as Imani, smiling, was lowered to the sidewalk, her mother Sarah waiting with a hug. Other children disembarked, chatting and laughing, their backpacks bobbing. They looked happy, safe. They belonged. A sense of profound, quiet satisfaction settled over me. The fight had been brutal, the cost immense, but looking at those children, at the transformed street, at the healing community, I knew it had been worth it. The flames of hatred had been met with a flood of courage, compassion, and an unyielding commitment to justice. And in the end, that is what had made all the difference. The echo of the fire would always remain, but louder now was the symphony of a community, rebuilding of children, thriving, a testament to the enduring power of hope and the relentless pursuit of a world where everyone is seen, valued, and unequivocally included. The work was far from over, but here on this quiet suburban street, a powerful victory had been won, and its resonance was a promise for a brighter, more inclusive future for all.